Light one candle for Christ, one bright candle for Christ. He brings love to all the earth. He comes, he comes. Hi friends, welcome to Chaplain's Time. I forgot to even call this Chaplain's Time on the description. I'm going to put this candle here. It is the second Sunday of Christmas, and so technically we would still be lighting the whole Advent wreath, but I am not at home, and I don't have my Advent wreath, but I thought we could still light our candle for Christ as we are still in this Christmas season. It's good to be with you, good to see you. There are other people in the house here, so if you hear some other voices, that's why. So I hope everyone has continued to have an okay week, even though it's feeling a little crazy out there. And the weather has kind of matched that general feeling of like out there. So listen, if you went to church this morning, or if you're familiar with the celebration of the Epiphany on January 6th, this is typically the week in the church that we remember this kind of like second half of this Christmas story, which we sing about in a bunch of our carols, but we don't talk about until a little bit after Christmas, which is this story of the wise men coming to see Jesus, right? So there's these wise men, they're magi. The magi people were known to be astrologers, so they studied the skies and the stars, which was not a commonly accepted practice in the church at the time. But they saw this star that had risen, and they go to King Herod and they say, where is this child that's been born? We've heard, we're watching this star. And Herod says, go and find the child. And he's all afraid about what it might mean, because he had heard things as well. And so the Magi travel, and they come to find Mary with her child, and they immediately know that they're in the presence of someone incredible, and they bow down and pay homage and give these gifts. We all know, like frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And then, because they've been warned in a dream but to not go back to Herod because he's up to no good, they flee, and they go home by another way. So that's the story. We often use this part of the story in our Christmas pageants. And I actually have this one really clear memory of a Christmas pageant at Trinity Church in Newport when I was a kid. And I think my sister had decided not to be part of the Christmas pageant. But then when we actually got to rehearsal for the Christmas pageant, she had a meltdown and said, I really want to be in the Christmas pageant. And I could actually be not remembering this story properly at all. So this is just my memory, which is not good. So anyway, she decided she wanted to be in the pageant. And if I recall correctly, what they did was they figured out that she could be the star in the story, because they had made this big crafted star, on a big pole, this kind of, paper star that was so pretty. And the pole wasn't probably as big in real life as it was in my memory being a young kid, but it was a big, big star. Maybe they were going to have an adult do it because it was on a pole. I don't know, but they decided that Kate could be the star. I think it was Kate. And so as this pageant was happening, the three young people who were cast as the Magi would follow this big paper star, up the parish hall into the stage. Now, there's a lot of things I could have learned from this experience, like that children can be fickle, or you should always have backup costumes if you're doing a Christmas pageant, or whatever. But as I reflected on this memory this week, I realized that the thing that I actually cemented in my brain somehow from this Christmas pageant story is this idea that the Magi followed a star that was literally a big paper star hanging right in front of their faces, and that the extent of their journey was from the back of the Trinity Church Parish Hall to the front of the Trinity Church Parish Hall. Isn't it weird what happens when you come across scripture stories as a kid, and the way you form these ideas? And I always worry about this a little bit, because then we become adults and we can read the story ourselves and we're just confused. Wait a minute, that's not what I remember from when I was a kid. But that's what happened to me as a kid, was this idea. Of course, I know the story about the wise men following the star to get to the baby Jesus, but I have always thought that it was not much of a feat, because in my head, there's this big paper star on a stick that somebody's just walking about 10 feet in front of them. So, like, that's not actually what happened, right? Like, for starters, we don't know exactly how far the Magi traveled to find Jesus, but we think it's somewhere in the vicinity of 400 miles, which means that they were traveling for a very long time. I don't know how fast. I don't know if there were actual camels there. I don't know how fast camels travel, but like, this was a journey, like a significant one that probably took at the very least a couple of weeks, right? And then this idea that they followed the stars, like, okay, so they were like, astrology is what they did. So arguably it would have been easier for them to follow a star than for, say, me to follow a star. But following a star is still not exactly like the easiest thing in the world to do. And what if they decided to travel during the day? And what if it was cloudy some night, right? It's so interesting because when we tell these stories after they have happened, when we pass these stories down for generation to generation, the part that remains is the truly fantastic parts, right? The truly moving parts, the parts that shape us and who we are and what our stories are. But like, of course, some of the details of what that journey were actually like were left out in the telling of this story. We hear this like really beautiful, fantastic piece about the Magi trusting themselves and following the star and then believing this dream that they had and going in a different direction. But we know that just because they were humans, there had to be cloudy days and days where they were questioning what they were doing and days that they worried about the power dynamic with King Herod and what would happen if they really flee and go in a different direction, and overwhelmed by coming in contact with this Christ child and not fully knowing what they were experiencing, right? Like, there's all of these things that happened in their experience. So the reason I want to just point out those discrepancies in this story is that I really believe that we are all invited into a story with God. We're invited into this story, this Christmas story that we share, and the beauty and the majesty of it, but we're also called to our own stories with God, our own journeys with God, our own travel with God, right? God is calling us always to the next thing for ourselves and for us to be our best selves and be in our best relationship with God. And I think sometimes, because I've grown up with stories like this, I think that there's going to be some big sign like right in front of my face, making it super clear what I'm supposed to do to follow God's call for me. And sometimes we get lucky and we do have something that's that clear, right? And other times we have an idea and we think, I think maybe this might be what I'm meant to do next. But then like there are cloudy days and there are days that we're not sure what we're doing. And there's days that we're afraid of all of the dynamics and the people and everything that's at play. And we fumble a little bit and we lose sight of whatever that call is, right? And so I want to say to you today, like, that work of hearing God's call and being courageous enough to follow it, like, that is the stuff right there. But don't be discouraged, or be discouraged, but like keep going forward when you hit the days that are cloudy or confusing or you question what you're doing, right? Fran McKendry, who is the singer-songwriter who's been with us at camp for years, and he died earlier this year, such a loss for our community and for everyone who knew Fran. He has this beautiful song, you can find it online on Spotify, called Waiting for Lightning. And the refrain of this song is, are you waiting for lightning when God quietly whispers your name? And I love it because I found myself caught up waiting for some big sign, for some actual crafted paper star to be held on a stick right in front of me as I walk 25 feet across a parish hall, right? Like sometimes I yearn for God's call to be that clear and that obvious. But it is just not always that simple. But that doesn't make that call to us any less important and any less worth like following those stars, right? Even if there's times when it's hard to know exactly where we're going or how it's gonna unfold. But I truly believe we are all called into stories, our own stories with God, our own journeys with God. And I think confusion and a little bit of despair and Some cloudiness is a normal part of the human experience as we try to navigate and trust that path for ourselves. But friends, I believe you have a star, right? I believe that God's light guides us always. And so I hope you will look for that light. And I hope you will be courageous enough to follow it. And I don't want to tell you not to be discouraged or not to have frustrated feelings when it's not going the way we want it to go, but persevere. Because then, when that particular journey in our lives has come to a close, we'll be able to look back and remember how fantastic and how beautiful our stories are. We need them. So, happy Epiphany, my friends. It is good to be with you. We'll do another Chaplain's Time next Sunday, and then when we are scheduled to do Church on the Move at St. Mary's Church in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. So, ECC Church on the Move. So, follow your star, my friends, and be well.